Hey, I'm Hannah. Don't look behind me, and don't ask where my fridge went. It's none of your business. For today's video, I was going to rewrite a story that I wrote when I was 8, but that turned out to require thinking, and I'm just not in the headspace to think today. So I'm not gonna. What could I do that requires little to no brain power? So today we are going to rewrite Twilight. I'm basically just trusting the website that I copy and pasted this from to actually be the Twilight book, but I honestly can't confirm that. And we have a preface here, which actually looks like a prologue, right? I don't know how far into it we'll be able to get, but let's get started. I'd never given much thought to how I would die, though I'd had reason enough in the last few months, but even if I had, I would not have imagined it like this. I do like this first part. I'd never given much thought to how I would die. I think I'm gonna cut all of this. I stared without breathing across the long room into the dark eyes of the hunter, and he looked pleasantly back at me. I like this imagery. I see what she's going for. It's just not working for me. I stared without breathing. What about I watched the hunter's dark eyes? Looked pleasantly is really weak. We could put smiled, and like that could read as nefarious, like it's an evil smile, but I don't think that weakens it. I think that's fine. Or we just put, this is gonna be 15 words long and we're done with it. Surely it was a good way to die in the place of someone else, someone I loved. Noble even. That ought to count for something. I'm gonna take out noble. Maybe we could make this more confident, like, at least that was a good way to die in the place of someone else, someone I loved. We could, I knew that if I'd never gone to Forks, I wouldn't be facing death now. I don't know if that's necessary. That's like really specific. Could say there. Or we could just take out the whole sentence. I knew if I'd stayed home, maybe. I couldn't bring myself to regret the decision. This is still just clunky for me, but I didn't regret it. Is that fine? When life offers you a dream so far beyond any of your expectations, it's not reasonable to grieve when it comes to an end. You know, I like that we go back to the hunter, but I don't like this sentence. We could just put something really simple, like raised his hand. You know, just like an action that he's taking that could suggest he's about to kill her. I'd never given much thought to how I would die. I think I'm actually gonna, I had never given much thought to how I'd die. That feels more natural to me. The hunter's dark eyes smiled at me. At least that was a good way to die in the place of someone I loved. That ought to count for something. I'm also gonna take out I knew if. When life offers you a dream so far beyond any of your expectations, it's not reasonable to grieve when it comes to an end. I don't love this sentence, but it is in line with Bella's, like, self-sacrificing kind of character. I also want this to be in present tense, but I don't think any of the books ever are. What if at least I would die in the place of someone I love? That ought to count for something. Well, now we might as well cut the whole thing. Okay, but personally, I enjoy this version a lot more. I had never given much thought to how I'd die. The hunter's dark eyes smiled at me. At least I would die in the place of someone I'd love. That ought to count for something. The hunter raised his hand. Just the bones. Chapter 1. My mother drove me to the airport with the windows rolled down. The windows down. It was 75 degrees in Phoenix, the sky a perfect cloudless blue. I was wearing my favorite shirt as a farewell gesture. My carry-on item was a Parker. I like that. Good job, Stephanie.
In the Olympic Peninsula of northwest Washington state, a small town named Forks exists under a near-constant cover of clouds. It rains on this inconsequential town more than any other place in the United States of America. It was from this town and its gloomy, omnipresent shade that my mother escaped with me when I was only a few months old. It was in this town that I'd been compelled to spend a month every summer until I was 14. That was the year I finally put my foot down. These past 3 summers, my dad, Charlie, vacationed with me in California for 2 weeks instead. It was to Forks that I now exiled myself, an action that I took with great horror. I detested Forks. I loved Phoenix. I loved the sun and the blistering heat. I loved the vigorous, sprawling city.
I think I'm gonna put I detested Forks at the end of that. To Forks that I now exiled myself. An action that I took with great horror. I think I'm gonna take this out. I loved Phoenix. I loved the sun and the blistering heat. I loved the vigorous, sprawling city. I detested Forks. Bella, my mom, said to me the last of 1,000 times before I got on the plane, you don't have to do this. I think I'm gonna Bella, you don't have to do this, my mom said before I boarded. My mom looks like me, except with short hair and laugh lines. I felt a spasm of panic as I stared at her wide, childlike eyes. How could I leave my loving, erratic, harebrained mother to fend for herself? I hate the way this teenager thinks. Every interaction she has is so unhealthy. But anyway, beside the point. Of course, she had Phil now, so the bills would probably get paid. There would be food in the refrigerator, gas in her car, and someone to call when she got lost. But still. I want to go, I lied. I'd always been a bad liar, but I'd been saying this lie so frequently lately that it sounded almost convincing now. I'm just going to say that it almost sounded true. Though just the way that the sentences are structured, they're hard to read. Tell Charlie I said hi. I will. I'll see you soon, she insisted. You can come home whenever you want. I'll come right back as soon as you need me. But I could see the sacrifice in her eyes behind the promise. Don't worry about me, I urged. It'll be great.
I love you, Mom. She hugged me tightly for a minute, and then I got on the plane, and she was gone. It's a 4-hour flight from Phoenix to Seattle, another hour in a small plane up to Port Angeles, and then an hour drive back down to Forks.
Flying doesn't bother me. The hour in the car with Charlie, though, I was a little worried about. Personal taste, I hate semicolons. Charlie had really been fairly nice about the whole... Charlie had been fairly nice. We don't need really and fairly. He seemed genuinely pleased that I was coming to live with him for the first time with any degree of permanence. We already know that it's for the first time. He'd already gotten me registered for high school and was going to help me get a car. But I was sure to be awkward with Charlie. Neither of us was what anyone would call I knew he's a little... I'm gonna take out that it's gonna be awkward because don't we see a conversation with him and see that it's awkward? When I landed in Port Angeles, it was raining. I didn't see it as an omen, just unavoidable. I'd already said my goodbyes to the sun. I like that. Charlie was waiting for me with the cruiser. This I was expecting to. My primary motivation behind buying a car, despite the scarcity of my funds, was that I refused to be driven around town in a car with red and blue lights on top. Nothing slows down traffic like a cop. Bella said a cab. Charlie gave me an awkward one-armed hug when I stumbled my way off the plane. It's good to see you, Bells, he said, smiling as he automatically caught and steadied me. You haven't changed much. How's Renee? They got automatically. Mom's fine. It's good to see you too, Dad. I wasn't allowed to call him Charlie to his face. I only had a few bags.
Most of my Arizona clothes were too permeable for Washington. My mom and I had pooled our resources to supplement my winter wardrobe, but it was still scanty. It all fit easily into the trunk of the cruiser. I found a good car for you, really cheap, he announced when we were strapped in. What kind of car? I was suspicious of the way he said good car for you as opposed to just good car.
Well, it's a truck, actually. A Chevy. Where did you find it? Do you remember Billy Black down at La Push? La Push is a tiny Indian reservation on the coast. No? He used to go fishing with us. That would explain why I didn't remember him. I do a good job of blocking painful, unnecessary things from my memory. What? Like fishing was painful? He's in a wheelchair now, Charlie continued when I didn't respond. So he can't drive anymore, and he offered to sell me his truck cheap. What year is it? I could see from his change of expression that this was the question he was hoping I wouldn't ask. Oh. Well, Billy's done a lot of work on the engine. It's only a few years old, really. I hoped he didn't think so little of me as to believe I would give up that easily. When did he buy it? He bought it in 1984, I think. Did he buy it new? Well, no. I think it was new in the early 60s or late 50s at the earliest. He admitted sheepishly. I don't want the repetition of early. Dad, I'm gonna do char. Because just a CH sound. I already forgot his name. Dad, I don't really know anything about cars. I wouldn't be able to fix it if anything went wrong. That's anything. Did this book have an editor? And I couldn't afford a mechanic. Really, Bella, the thing runs great. They don't build them like that anymore. The thing, I thought to myself, it had possibilities as a nickname, at the very least. The thing. A good nickname possibility. Why do we have to use 1,000 words when 5 will do? This is why the first draft of my fantasy novel was like 50,000 words. How cheap is cheap? After all, that was the part I couldn't compromise on. I asked. Well, honey, I kind of already bought it for you as a homecoming gift. Charlie peeked sideways at me with a hopeful expression. I love Charlie. Wow, free. You didn't need to do that, Dad. I was going to buy myself a car. I don't mind. I want you to be happy here. He was looking ahead at the road when he said this. Charlie wasn't comfortable with expressing his emotions out loud. I inherited that from him. So I was looking straight ahead as I responded. This is just an inch too telly. Like, we already know that about her. That's really nice, Dad. Thanks. I really appreciate it. No need to add that my being happy in Forks is an impossibility. He didn't need to suffer along with me, and I never looked a free truck in the mouth or engine. You should definitely look it in the engine. Like, there's nothing wrong with this. It's just her character, but I hate how every single thing she does is just completely self-sacrificing. That's not my favorite character for little girls to look up to. Well, now you're welcome. Embarrassment. Okay, I think having him mumble already shows that he's nervous about it, and I think if we could put he mumbled right here, it gives us like that little country boy hesitation. Well, now he mumbled, you're welcome. Yeah, that works. We exchanged a few more comments on the weather, which was wet. That makes it sound like the comments are wet. And that was pretty much it for capital C conversation. We stared out the windows in silence. I think, I'm not a huge fan of putting things in parentheses, but I think this connects it more to weather than to comments. It was beautiful, of course. I couldn't deny that. Everything was green. I don't think we need a colon and a semicolon back to back like that. Everything was green. The trees, their trunks covered with moss, their branches hanging with a canopy of it, the ground covered with ferns, even the air filtered down greenly through the leaves. It was too green, an alien planet. I'm messing with that. That's fine. Eventually we made it to Charlie's. He still lived in the small 2-bedroom house that he'd bought with my mother in the early days of their marriage. Those were the only kind of days their marriage had, the early ones. They got divorced real fast. What if we just put the early days of their marriage and then the only days of their marriage? That's just quicker. There, parked on the street in front of the house that never changed, was my new truck. Okay, we don't need well new to me. It was... I hate when people do that. They say the color and then say that it's a color. Faded red with big rounded fenders and a bulbous cab. Dude, her car slaps. I'd drive that truck. To my intense surprise, I loved it.
I didn't know if it would run, but I could see myself in it. Plus, it was one of those solid iron affairs that never gets damaged, the kind you see at the scene of an accident, paint unscratched, surrounded by the pieces of the foreign car it had destroyed.
Wow, Dad, I love it. Thanks. Now my horrific day tomorrow would be just that much less... dreadful. Honey! What about my... first day of school would be a little less dreadful. Why not that? Or we could even make her a little more pessimistic. Maybe my first day of school would be a little less dreadful. Okay, I've had enough of this. Let me know if that did anything for you. I can continue editing Twilight. This is easy. As you can see, I'm moving. So next week, I'll be in a different state. I don't know how good the video is going to be or if there'll even be one. But subscribe. Hit the notification bell. Eventually I will upload again, if not next week. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.